My name is Julia, and this is the story I never imagined I'll be the one telling. I met Kelvin during my final year at the university. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but there was something about his calm confidence that drew people in. He always looked like he knew exactly what he was doing, and that kind of assurance was magnetic. He worked in a small tech company not too far from campus. We met through a mutual friend at a birthday party, and we got talking about random things: music, food, how annoying group assignments were. Before I knew it, we had exchanged numbers, and a few days later, he invited me out for lunch. Kelvin wasn't like the other guys I had dated or been around. He listened when I spoke. He asked questions about my dreams. He made me laugh, and he never tried to be someone he wasn't. Over time, I grew to love him, not in a crazy, over-the-top way, but slowly and steadily. The kind of love that makes you feel safe. By the time I graduated, we had been dating for almost a year. It felt natural to talk about the future. We would go on long walks and imagine what our life together could look like. Our own place, small Sunday routines, maybe a child or two. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other. And at that time, it felt like enough. After graduation, I moved back home while job hunting, and Kelvin and I continued dating. We were still going strong, and it felt like the right time to let my family know about him. I thought it was important for them to see the man I'd fallen in love with. I honestly believe that once they get to know him, they would understand why I cared so much about him. I planned everything out, picked a weekend when everyone would be home, cooked something simple, and invited Kelvin over. I told him to keep it casual, just be himself. He was a little nervous, but he agreed. The evening started off quietly. My mom was polite. My siblings were curious, but my dad barely said a word. He kept watching Kelvin closely, like he was trying to size him up. And then, halfway through the evening, my dad finally spoke. "I don't like where he's from," he said, plain and sharp. The room went quiet. Kelvin looked a little confused, maybe even hurt, but he stayed respectful. My dad didn't stop there. He said Kelvin sounded too sure of himself, too arrogant for someone from that background. It felt like he had already made his decision before even meeting him. I tried to defend Kelvin, to explain that confidence didn't mean arrogance, that where someone came from didn't define who they were. But my words bounced off walls that had already been built. After Kelvin left, my parents sat me down and told me plainly they didn't want me to see him anymore. They said it wasn't just about his background or his tone. They didn't trust him. They didn't think he was the kind of man I should be with. And for them, that was the end of the conversation. I remember lying on my bed that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was being asked to choose between the people who raised me and the person I loved. It wasn't a small decision. I loved my family, but I also knew my own heart. I wasn't being rebellious for the sake of it. I just knew that Kelvin made me happy in a way that felt real and grounding. I didn't stop seeing him. I couldn't, but I didn't tell my family that. I stopped bringing up his name at home. I avoided conversation about relationships altogether. It felt like I was living two lives. One with the man I loved, and one with the family I didn't want to disappoint. Kevin knew the situation. He never pressured me to pick sides, but I could tell it weighed on him too. He wanted things to be open and honest. He wanted to meet my family again under better circumstances. But as time passed, it became clear that nothing was going to change on that front. We dated like that, quietly, steadily for another year and a half. We celebrated birthdays and anniversaries in our own small ways. We made future plans. We talked about marriage more seriously. At some point, it stopped feeling like a distant goal and started feeling like a necessary step. We were both adults, we both had jobs, and we loved each other. One night, while we were sitting on his couch watching a movie we weren't really paying attention to, Kelvin turned to me and said, "So, are we doing this or not?" I knew what he meant. I looked at him, thought about all the moments we had shared, the laughs, the long conversations, the quiet support, and I nodded. Yes, I said, "Let's do it." We decided to get married legally. No big events, no traditional ceremony, just us, a few close friends, and the law. It wasn't how I had always imagined getting married, but in a way, it felt more real. We weren't doing it for show. We were doing it for us. On the day we got married, I wore a simple cream dress I had picked up a week before. Kelvin wore a dark suit and a calm smile. We exchanged vows in a small office, signed the papers, and stepped out as husband and wife. There were no parents, no extended family, just a handful of friends cheering us on. Afterward, we had lunch at a little restaurant and went home together. We didn't have a honeymoon or a big celebration, but that night, lying beside him, I felt peace. I had chosen love, and at that moment, it felt like the right choice. Moving in with Kelvin felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. My parents didn't know the full truth. They just thought I was moving out because of work. I told them my new office had given me a place closer to the job, and they didn't ask too much questions. Maybe they believed me because I had always been the responsible one, the one who never gave them stress. Maybe they just didn't want to believe anything else. The flat Kelvin and I rented was small but cozy. It had one bedroom, a kitchen that always smelled like home-cooked meals, and a living room where we spent most evenings talking, watching TV, or just doing our own things together. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and for a while, that was more than enough for me. Still, I couldn't shake the tension inside. I loved Kelvin, but the distance from my family never left me. My mom would call to check in now and then, and I would answer like nothing had changed. We would talk about work, food, the weather, never about my relationship or where things really stood. My dad, on the other hand, stayed quiet. He didn't call. I didn't either. Every time I saw a picture of a family gathering in the family group chat, birthdays, church events, cousins getting together, it hit me all over again. I was living this whole other life they didn't know about. A married woman now, yet pretending to be the same daughter they thought they knew. I didn't regret marrying Kelvin. I regretted the lie. But the truth would have broken things beyond repair, and I wasn't ready for that. Kelvin noticed the weight I was carrying. He tried to be supportive. Maybe they would come around. He would say sometimes, rubbing my back as I sat staring at my phone after one of those silent calls with my mom. But months passed, and nothing changed. We celebrated our 1-year wedding anniversary with pizza and a movie at home. It was simple, just like our wedding had been. I told Kelvin that night how grateful I was for him. "I know this is not how we have pictured it," I said, holding his hand, "but I am glad I'm here with you." He smiled. "Same here." Not long after that, I found out I was pregnant. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't a shock either. We'll talk about having kids someday. I had stopped using birth control a few months earlier, half expecting it might take time, but life had other plans. When I saw the 2 pink lines, I sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. I wasn't scared, just overwhelmed. A baby, a whole new life. Kelvin felt thrilled when I told him. He lifted me off the ground in a bear hug. "We are having a baby," he kept repeating, like he couldn't believe it either. Pregnancy wasn't easy, especially without my mom around. There were so many moments I wished I could call her and ask simple things. Is this cramp normal? Why do I feel so tired all the time? But I didn't. Instead, I leaned on Google and Kelvin, who tried his best. He came with me to appointments, bought me every food I craved, even the weird ones, and rubbed my feet when they got swollen. He even tried to learn how to cook more healthy meals for me, which was a whole adventure on its own. Still, there were lonely moments when I walked past baby stores, when I felt that first kick, when I couldn't sleep at night. I wanted to share those things with someone who had been there, someone who knew what it meant to carry a child. But all I had was silence from the people I used to be closest to. When the baby finally came, he held the baby boy. I cried not just because of the joy, but also because of the grief. I had created life, yet there was no grandmother rushing over with soup, no proud aunties showing up with clothes or advice, just me, Kelvin, and the elderly woman I had hired to help with bathing the baby. Her name was Mama Grace. She had been referred by someone Kelvin knew, and from the day she arrived, she was a blessing. She didn't ask too many questions. She just helped, calmly, patiently, like she knew what I needed before I said it. Those first few months after giving birth were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and learning on the go. Kelvin helped when he could, though work got busier for him. Still, he made time for us when he could, or at least he did at first. Looking back now, I wonder if I missed the signs early on. He started coming home later, saying he had meetings or last-minute projects. He seemed distracted sometimes, even when we were together. I chalked it up to work stress and adjusting to new fatherhood. We were both tired after all. Then one evening, out of the blue, he came home looking unsettled. He didn't sit. He didn't eat. He just stood there, rubbing the back of his neck like he didn't know where to begin. My parents are coming into town, he finally said. I blinked. Okay, when? This weekend. I smiled, assuming it was a good thing. That's great. Do they want to meet the baby? Kevin hesitated. Then he said something I still remember word for word. They don't know we are married or that we have a child, so you and the baby will have to leave the house for a while. The words hit me like a slap. I laughed nervously, waiting for the punchline. But he wasn't joking. I just need a few days to figure it out, he said, avoiding my eyes. I rented a small place temporarily. I'll take you there tomorrow. And just like that, everything started to shift. I remember sitting in the car that next morning, holding our baby on my lap while Kevin drove us to the place he said he had rented temporarily. I didn't speak much. My mind was racing, trying to process everything. I had married this man, had a child with him, trusted him with everything, and yet here I was, being driven out of my home like some kind of secret. The place was a small single room with a tiny bathroom and a corner that barely passed for a kitchen. It wasn't filthy, but it was cold and unfamiliar. I stood in the middle of the room, holding my back, looking around, wondering how I got there. Kevin said it would just be for a few days, 3 or 4 max. He promised he would come get us as soon as his parents left. He helped me settle in a bit, dropped off a few clothes, formula for the baby, and some toiletries. Then, he kissed me on the forehead and said, just hang in there. I'll be back before you know it. But 3 days turned into a week, then 2. Every day, he came by with 1 or 2 things. My hairdryer, a few of my baby's toy, some clothes. He said his parents were still in town, working on a project, and that it wasn't safe for me to return just yet. He smiled when he said it, like everything was under control, but I could see something was off. Why can't they just know the truth? I asked one evening. That you are married, that you have a child. He sighed, like he had answered that question 100 times in his head already. They are old-fashioned, he said. They wouldn't understand. If I had told them from the beginning, maybe. But now it's complicated. Complicated. That word kept echoing in my mind. I used to believe our love could handle complicated. But now, complicated felt like a locked door he didn't want to open. By the third week, the small room started feeling less like a temporary hideaway and more like a prison. I barely went out. I didn't want to bump onto anyone who might know me or him. I had left home under the lie of work housing, and I had told no one the truth about my marriage. If anyone saw me like this, with a baby, in a place like this, how would I explain? Then one morning, Kevin brought the last of my things, my books, my favorite pillow, the framed photo we had taken the day we got married. I stared at the bag he dropped on the floor and asked, "So, this is it? You're not taking me back?" He didn't say anything at first, just sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at his hands. Then he said it. "My parents have chosen someone else for me." The room went silent. Even the baby, as if sensing the shift, stopped making noise. "What?" I whispered. Then, "They brought someone from back home," he continued, barely looking at me. "Someone they've known for years. They said she's better fit, more acceptable." I felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at the man I had given everything to. "So, what does that mean for me? For us?" He rubbed his face, clearly struggling. "I can't fight them, Julia. You know how my family is. They would disown me. They already think I've lost my way. I thought I could keep this under wraps until things settled. But now, they've moved fast. The girl is already living in the house." I blinked, confused. "You mean our house?" He nodded. "I need you to understand, this doesn't change how I feel about you. You're still my wife. I still care about you. I need you to stay here for now, quietly. Don't make noise. Don't try to confront them. Just wait until I figure this out." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just a secret. I was the burden he was hiding. He wanted me to stay in that tiny room, raise our baby, and pretend everything was fine, while he played the perfect son and new husband in a life that didn't include me. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I didn't even cry. I just sat down, held my baby, and nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. Because what else could I say? I had no backup plan, no family to turn to, no one who even knew the truth about my life. Days turned into weeks. Kelvin started coming less and less. First, it was every other day, then once a week, then not at all. I texted. He didn't reply. I called. He didn't answer. Mama Grace kept coming to help me with the baby. She didn't ask questions, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I think she knew more than I let on. 4 months passed. 4 whole months without a visit, a phone call, even a message, nothing. Kelvin disappeared like we didn't exist. Like the marriage never happened. Like her son wasn't real. Sometimes I sat and stared at the door, hoping it would open, hoping it would walk in with the same nervous smile he used to have when we first met, hoping he would say this was all a big mistake, that he was coming to take us home. But the door never opened. And the man I loved, the man I married, never came back. Some mornings, I would wake up hoping everything that happened was just a bad dream. I would look around the tiny room, the crib in the corner, the half-packed bags I never really unpacked, and then reality would hit me again. This was my life now. Mama Grace still came by to help. Without her, I don't know how I would have coped. She showed up every morning, early, always with a calm presence and warm smile. She had bathed my son, gave me advice on feeding and sleeping routines, and even cooked small meals when she saw I hadn't eaten. Every day felt like a loop. Feed the baby, bath the baby, try to sleep, and repeat. The only thing that ever changed was my hope, shrinking bit by bit with each passing day. Kevin's silence became louder than any fight we ever had. I tried to reach him dozens of times. First with texts, short, simple messages asking if he was okay, then with longer ones, pouring my heart out, begging for even a sentence in return. I sent pictures of the baby too, hoping it would remind him of the family he was leaving behind. But nothing came back, not a single response. I started to imagine all kinds of scenarios. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he had lost his phone. Maybe he was just overwhelmed and needed time. But deep down, I knew better. He was ignoring me intentionally. He had chosen his parents and by extension, this new woman they brought to him. He was living the life they approved of while living the one he actually built in hiding. What made it worse was knowing that I had kept everything from my family to be with him. I had told lie after lie, covered up the truth, and now he had no one to call. Sometimes I stared at my phone, wondering what would happen if I had died my mom. What would I even say? Hi, Mom. Remember Kelvin? The guy you told me to leave. Yeah, I married him, had a baby, and now he's disappeared. There was no easy way to undo the silence. I had already burned the bridge when I left home without saying the full truth. Going back would mean swallowing all my pride and accepting all the I told you so moments I wasn't ready for. But I was tired, not just physically from the long nights with the baby, but emotionally too. Tired of pretending I was okay. Tired of hoping Kelvin would come back. Tired of living like I didn't exist to the man who's supposed to love me the most. One night, I couldn't sleep. The baby was finally quiet after a long day of fussing. But my mind kept spinning. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall, holding an old photo of Kelvin and me. It was one we had taken in the early days of our relationship, both of us smiling carefree, back when I thought love was enough. I cried silently that night, not loud, sobbing tears, just quiet, constant ones that didn't seem to end. I cried for the girl I used to be, the one who believed in fairy tales. I cried for my son, who deserved better, and I cried for the marriage I was still trying to hold on to, even though it had already fallen apart. The next morning, Mama Grace showed up as usual. She took one look at me and paused. "You didn't sleep," she said, setting her bag down. I shook my head, barely able to speak. She walked over, gently took the baby from my arms and sat down. After a few minutes of silence, she said, "You know, child, sometimes we think love means staying no matter what. But sometimes, love also means letting go for your own peace." Her words stayed with me all day. For weeks, I had been telling myself that I needed to be strong, that I needed to wait, that maybe, somehow, Kevin would realize what he had lost and come back. But maybe what I really needed was to stop waiting. Maybe this version of love, the kind that hides, the kind that runs, the kind that abandons, wasn't love at all. A few days later, I decided to visit the area around our old apartment. I told Mama Grace I needed to clear my head and left the baby in her care for a few hours. I hadn't been back there since the day Kelvin drove us away. When I got to the house, I didn't go to the door. I just stood across the street and watched. The front yard looked well kept. There were fresh flowers on the porch and the curtains had changed. Someone else was living there now. Someone accepted. Someone chosen. A woman came out at one point. She was dressed nicely, laughing on the phone, holding car keys. I didn't recognize her, but I didn't have to. I walked away before she could see me. That night, I started packing a few bags. Not because I had a destination, but because I needed to start thinking about one. Staying in the room felt like waiting for something that was never going to happen. I didn't know if I was ready to face my parents or tell the full story, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending that silence meant hope. Kevin had made his choice. Now, I had to make mine. The next few weeks were quiet, too quiet. I didn't hear from Kelvin, not a call, not a text, not even a, "How is the baby?" Nothing. The man I used to wake up next to, the man I had trusted with everything. He had vanished. And even though my heart wanted to hold on to some small piece of hope, I started to accept the truth. He was gone. Not gone physically. He was still living, breathing, existing somewhere just across town, but gone from my life in every real way that mattered. I stopped asking questions, stopped expecting him to walk through the door. Instead, I focused on the only thing I had left, my son. Every time I looked at him, a mix of emotions washed over me. He had his father's eyes, sharp, dark, always scanning the room. But his smile, that was mine. And every time he smiled, something in me softened. It reminded me that, despite the pain, something beautiful had come from all this. Mama Grace was the only constant through it all. She never judged me, never pried. She showed up, helped, and offered quiet strength when mine felt like it was fading. One morning, she brought over a small pot of jollof rice and said, "You need to eat well if you want to keep standing." It wasn't just food. It was a message. I had to keep standing for myself and for my child. But I also knew I couldn't keep hiding. At some point, I would need to face the rest of my life. And that meant facing the people I had shut out. My family. I thought about calling my mother so many times. I would unlock my phone, scroll to her name, stare at the screen, then lock it again. I kept telling myself I needed the right words, the right moment, but really, I was afraid. Afraid of the judgment, the disappointment, the pain in her voice when she realized everything had been true, and how I never told her. Still, silence wasn't helping either. One Sunday afternoon, I finally gathered courage. My son was asleep. The room was quiet, and I had no more excuses left. I sat on the floor with the phone in my hand and pressed call. It rang twice before she picked up. "Hello." Her voice sounded the same. Warm, gentle, and familiar. I didn't know what to say. For a second, I just sat there, holding the phone to my ear, frozen. "Julia," she said again, this time with concern. Tears came before the words did. "Mom, I'm sorry." I told her everything. Not all at once, but slowly. I told her about Kelvin, the secret marriage, the baby, the lies, the room, the silence. She didn't interrupt. She didn't yell. She just listened. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "Come home." That was it. Not, "I told you so." Not, "Why didn't you listen?" Just, "Come home." I cried again, this time from relief. It took me a few days to sort things out, but eventually, I packed what little we had and moved back with my family. They welcomed me quietly. My dad was stiff at first, barely spoke a word, but I could see it in his eyes. He was hurting too, not just for me, but for everything left unsaid. My mom held my son and said, "He looks like you." It was a way of forgiving me. Living at home again wasn't easy. It was humbling, even awkward at times, but it was safe. And after everything, safety was a gift. Weeks later, I found myself scrolling through Kelvin's social media out of curiosity. He had changed his profile photo to one with the new woman, his real wife now, I guess. There they were, smiling at some event, dressed in matching outfits, looking like the perfect couple. But I knew the truth. Behind that picture was a man who couldn't face his own choices. A man who left his wife and child in a room while pretending to be someone else. A man who didn't even say goodbye. I felt anger at first, then pity, then nothing. That's when I realized I was healing. Healing didn't mean forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It meant accepting the truth and learning to live beyond it. It meant knowing that love isn't meant to hide. That if someone truly sees you, chooses you, then they don't disappear when things get hard. I started working again, found a remote job that allowed me to be at home with my son. I took each day one step at a time. Some days were heavy, But most days I smiled, real smiles, not the first kind I used to wear. And my son, he grew fast. He started crawling, then walking, then talking in those broken, adorable baby sentences that only I could understand. He became my reason to get up, to try again, to keep going. One night, while tucking him into bed, he looked up at me and said, "Mommy, happy?" I nodded, kissing his forehead, and whispered, "I'm getting there." And I was. I don't know if Kelvin will ever try to come back or fix what he broke, but I've learned that I don't need him to, because I'm no longer waiting to be loved. I'm learning to love myself again. And that is enough. I hope you love this story. If you do, you will love the next one. Click to watch it now. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.